October 17th, 2022 meeting of the Public Health and Safety Committee. I know it's October 17th because it's my brother's birthday. So. And I did send him a card.
Wait, is tomorrow your birthday?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, thank you.
So did he send you a card?
Yeah, he did.
His
He
mother's
did.
birthday, my mother's death anniversary.
No, but the first order of business is to approve the minutes of the September 19th, 2022 meeting that we had just basically a month ago.
Motion to approve.
Okay, second? All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous, thank you. Then the next order of business, we're going to review and discuss the RTM Planning and Zoning Commission's local control over accessory apartments as they pertain to public health and safety. And it's nice we have Jeremy Ginsburg here to give us a little update.
Sure, good evening everyone. Jeremy Ginsburg, Planning and Zoning Director. To give you a little background here, my understanding is you received a couple of documents including the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval. So I'll back it up from the first moment. Last year, about this time, state statute took effect, changing a number of things relative to housing in town. And one of them was allow everyone in the state of Connecticut to have an accessory apartment, one extra unit on your property, unless your community opts out of that provision. So all the communities must act by next December 31st. So it's 60 days away, or the state statute on accessory apartments goes into effect. So Planning and Zoning took it up this year and said, what do we want to do? Do we want the state statute to impose this on us, or do we want to vote to opt out? You may recall, many of you who were here last year voted to opt out of multifamily parking standards, which were imposed by the state of Connecticut. Thank you all for your votes last year. That Planning and Zoning voted on those, and then the RTM voted on those as well. So here we are again this year, and I'm sad to say we might be here next year for something else as the state starts becoming more all-encompassing and deciding that they want to impose various limits and restrictions. So let's talk about accessory apartments. It's basically, the way the state has defined it is an automatic unit in everyone's house. It could be attached, detached, somewhere on your property. It would be allowed as of right, so you would not need to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. You wouldn't need a special permit. You just come in for a simple sign off by our department, which must be issued. And it has a number of other provisions. What can the apartment be? It can't be bigger than this or smaller than that. One interesting provision is that there's no requirement that the unit be affordable. You could rent it out for whatever the going rate is. $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, whatever it is. So I think some of the premise of this from the state is, well, to create more housing, or more affordable housing maybe, but I don't think that's the case in Darien. We're a little different, of course, you all know. And that I would expect all of you would just rent it at whatever the going rate is. Why would you limit yourself when you could rent it for more? Of course, as you put another unit on your property, that brings the people will likely own a car, or two, or three. They will need a spot to put those cars. There's no provision in the state statute that would require us to create more parking on your property. So they would probably be parked, I don't know, maybe on the street, maybe in front of your neighbor's property. Who knows where the cars would go? The other thing is sewage. I'm sure the people that live there would love to flush the toilet a couple times a day. And as you know, our sewage goes to Stanford. And if you're giving everyone in Darien one fell swoop, all 7,000 households, an extra unit, that's overnight, potentially 7,000 units. What about taking into account capacity for traffic, parking, septic? The state didn't cover any of that. So the commission, in its September 19, 2022 decision, where they voted to opt out, talked about topics like this. That the state's standards and imposition doesn't account for parking, traffic, sewage, the lack of doesn't require a public hearing, and really it takes away local control from Darien. So the commission voted 6-0 to opt out, and then under the statutes, this now goes to you, the RTM, and it needs to pass by a 2/3 vote. And if you pass it tonight to opt out, the town will have successfully did what it did last year on multifamily parking and opt out of this standard set by the state of Connecticut. My belief is most communities in the state of Connecticut are voting to opt out. So I'm happy to answer any questions about how this all came about, why we're here tonight. Really, it's the reason we wanted to get it before you tonight is because we really need to do it before year end, because if the RTM doesn't vote by the end of the year, it goes right into effect. So I would have people lined up on my doorstep January 2nd to get their apartment. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic, the way the state has drawn this up. The towns need to decide what they want to do. As I said, I think the state statute's pretty straightforward. The commission's decision was succinct but firm. And I know Wayne Fox, town council, has drawn up a resolution which you'll be voting on this evening. So I'm happy to answer any questions or clarity on the statute, anything I can help with tonight.
Well, go ahead.
My only question was, if we opt out, what are the requirements or repercussions or anything? Once we opt out,
Excellent
what
question.
happens?
The Planning and Zoning Commission has said, you know what? This might be something worth looking into as a way to deal with affordable housing or other housing needs in the community, but we need to study it, analyze it, figure out, there may be neighborhoods where it perfectly makes sense. There may be other neighborhoods that maybe there's properties on septic systems. You're like, well, maybe not so much on septic. So they're going to kick it around next year and struggle with what might work, what might not work. As for the ramifications, it's very clear the state gave the communities the ability to opt out. That's it. So there's no dirty looks at us or, Darien gets criticized in the newspaper all the time. I've learned to ignore it. But, so yeah, that's why the opt-out provision's there, for just this reason, so.
Go ahead, Lois.
I just wanted to follow up, when we opted out the last time, one of the concerns was, would it make us look bad, add to our bad press and things like that? So it's a year later, and how many people opted out of the last one? And what, was there any repercussions on the last one, ignoring this one, of what we opted out of the last
I
one?
did not hear any on multifamily housing. I know there were repercussions in the newspaper about, as part of the statute, they moved up the deadline to complete your affordable housing plan. And you may have noticed in the local papers, they criticized communities that were a little bit late of getting their plan in. It was due in June. Our local planning and zoning commission here in Darien decided to have a public hearing. Most communities did not. Darien did, and we adopted it in September 14th, I believe. So we were right in the middle. Believe it, 169 communities, we were about in the middle. Many communities have still not finished theirs, including City of Norwalk. Certainly the proponents of housing and the proponents of this statute, they have their own views, which may not reflect your views or my views or the Planning and Zoning Commission's views or the views of other communities.
So there's less, I think that was the first time that we opted out of the
That's right.
state ruling, and so there was some hesitation. I don't hear that hesitation with this new option of opting out of this rule.
Well, we
I just
also did
wanted
the
to-
granny pots. Remember Granny Pots was done like, what, 5 years
Wasn't that
ago?
the same thing, or no?
I don't know if that was
I
that
don't
was
remember.
the same opt-out.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
What's interesting is, when you, I'm not a legislator up in Hartford, but, when those 100 and some legislators get together and they negotiate bills, one way that the housing advocates get their bills passed is, hey, include all these things. And then the opponents sometimes say, if you give communities an opt-out, I'll vote for it. In other words, giving my community the ability to say, yes, I want it, or no, I don't, versus having it imposed with no opt-out. So I think there was some negotiating up in Hartford, and that could be how these opt-outs get in, because that's kind of a new thing.
go ahead, Jim.
So, as I understand it, if we approve the opt-out, is there any time limit for P and Z to decide what it wants to set in terms of guidelines?
There is no limit. Really, the limit is whether to opt out. If you don't opt out by December 31st, you're stuck with the state provisions. If you do vote to opt out, you can determine what you want to do at your leisure. You can study it, analyze it, pass something next year, the year after, whatever it is. But the time deadline is over.
One thing that was mentioned that I picked up on was there's no requirement to have an exterior door. And could you maybe talk about that? Because that sounded like a real safety issue.
Certainly, whatever gets constructed would have to meet the building code. You know, if you need a building permit, the building official would have to look at whether it meets the code at the time. You know, there's 100 different ways to design these. One might be a basement unit, but of course, you can imagine if you're living in a basement, you need means of egress, and they can't be too close to each other. One needs to be at one end, one needs to be, there's very specific things. You know, when people come in for their permit, the only way we could deny the permit is if it doesn't meet the building code. But you're right, there's a lot of safety provisions, and that's why we're here tonight. Not only parking, traffic, septic, which are all safety issues, but the whole issue of, as people design these units, and there would be a sense of, hey, the statute gives me something, making sure whatever they put together is safe for human habitation. Whether it's ceiling heights or egress doors or windows or whatever it might be. Because you may be turning space that's not now a unit into a living space. And that's a whole different...
Well, it mentioned that the town might have permitted someone to build a garage or just a storage structure right up next to someone's property line, but with no even thought process, someone would be living in it. And now all of a sudden, if you're making it an apartment with a living space, there's all kinds of issues about being that close to that other house. And I think that's talked about in here.
Right, and if you turn your garage into an apartment, you know, what egress doors, egress windows that you would have, and how would you get in and out, and things like that. So there are many things to consider, and I think it's better for planning and zoning to analyze and study these things versus taking what the state gives us and just saying, okay, we gotta live with that.
I think I remember last time, it was not only if you agreed to it, which I'm not proposing, but that you were buying into what the state was deciding at that point. And then if the state decided something else, you automatically were into whatever the state decided. Even if there was something that we agreed to, you're still vulnerable because the state could change it and we've lost the ability to make our decisions.
Regulate it, that's correct. And that's, I think what you read in the commission's decision, that's their concern is as we lose more and more ability to control, regulate, monitor, kind of lose the dynamics of, you know, small town. You know, if everyone's all of a sudden overnight gets a second unit, we're going from a town of 20,000 to a town of 30, 35, 40. And that's what this would allow.
Okay. Any further questions or comments about it? Might as well put this to a vote.
Do we need a motion?
Sure.
I move that we approve the opt-out provision as being presented to the RTM.
All in favor?
You need a second?
Oh, second?
Second.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed, abstentions? I think we're good. Okay. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, pleasure meeting you all.
Thanks, Jeremy.
You're welcome to stay. No.
I gotta make sure I make the next meeting.
Thank you. Okay. Well, that's the only thing we had on our agenda to vote on, but I thought there'd be some things that we could talk about. There's some things kind of coming down the pike. Lois, you want to maybe make some comments?
One of the things that a number of people, well, many of us have been following, is the proposals from the Board of Ed for changes to their staffing and put in school security officers in the elementary schools. And my understanding of where it is right now is it's past the Board of Ed, that they had one presentation meeting and one discussion, and it passed the Board of Ed on the 11th. I was under the, well, anyway, it apparently is not, but that may change, on the Board of Finance's agenda for tomorrow night. The proposal, are people familiar with it, mostly? That it has to do with security at all our elementary schools. And the idea is to add a district security office, a head of district security, as well as 6 what they're calling school security officers, which are going to report to the school system, which are different from the school resource officers, which are in the middle school and high school. So I don't want to get too far into it because, you know, an appropriate presentation would be good.
Sure.
And so I've also sent Mac a listing of, for the Board of Ed, when they had their meetings discussing this, and the timing on when you can see it, as well as the documentation where it is from the Board of Ed website, so we can all go back and get some details. This is happening very quickly. There's some discussion on whether the RTM will vote on it. I think the current plan is the State of the Town, December 6th. But since we reconstitute, so our committee is effective until Election Day, right?
Right.
Okay, so we're effective till Election Day, and that's our responsibilities. Once Election Day happens, then the Rules Committee decides on the, get this right, on the 14th. No, the 14th we meet and turn in our things. On the 21st, the Rules Committee meets to assign people to different committees. And then the 28th is an RTM meeting where those committees gather together and have their initial meetings. So it's really hard to find a lot of time in there to do it. One of the things, Mac and I have had some informal conversations about this. And there's some ideas of, well, maybe we should have some kind of informal conversations, that nothing's formal. We certainly can't vote till we know exactly what's happening, and certainly until it goes to the Board of Finance too. But that's part of our discussion, is to say, well, what do we want to know and when do we want to know it in order to be prepared for, say, that it goes ahead with this December 5th or 6th voting. Is that good?
Well, I can send out what you sent to me. I haven't looked at it yet, but it's very nice. You've taken the video and you tell us, you know, the little piece to watch, so you're not looking at 2.5 hours of, yeah, it's just a smaller window, but thank you. But it is tough because, you know, we will, I guess this is officially our last meeting, is that right? Before the election.
Unless scheduled, I mean, you can call in.
I could, but I mean, of any that we're really doing business on. And then we have the election, and it's quite possible we'll all be back, but there might be some new people. So it could be a little bit different.
Could we, I don't know whether everybody would be interested, but one of the things, I think it was your idea, Mac, actually, and that was that maybe we try and organize an informational meeting with the Board of Ed in conjunction with some other RTM committees, not to decide or things, but so we have time. I mean, to me, the concept of, you know, you're going to you start your presentations on the 28th of November, and then by December 6th, you're going to vote for having 7 more people in our budgets on an ongoing basis, and who are they and what are they doing, and these retired officers are walking around with guns in our elementary school. Seems to me that that the RTM, since we vote on this, should have some time to understand, assimilate, and do it. And I understand that we can't vote on anything, certainly. We don't even know when quorum is going to come to us if it hasn't been approved by the Board of Finance. Right. Do you want to go further with what?
Well, just we thought it might make sense to have a meeting with us in it, possibly the Education Committee, but have it in the auditorium and encourage people to come. I mean, you know, citizens, constituents come and express concerns, but also be able to ask and get answers. maybe Chief Anderson would be there, because he's actively involved in this. It's kind of interesting, what I've gotten out of it is that they can't talk too much about what they're doing, because a lot of it is involves security, and they don't want to be telling people what they're doing, where the officer's going to be at a given time during the day, that kind of thing.
Are you envisioning that as like a public hearing where the public would be invited to come and comment?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Because I think there's been some talk about why there isn't a public hearing on this as well.
I'd be really interested, since I don't have any kids in the school system, how many, I don't know how many of you have kids in the school system, and.
Kindergarten, 4.
Okay,
I'm
and
a high schooler, so.
So, and I'm curious whether you feel that people have communicated to you, that you know what's going on, that you've had an opportunity to have a statement or say something if you wanted to. Not that the Board of Ed necessarily has to listen, because this is a security issue and they get to do the voting. So, but I'm still curious whether you all have a sense that you're aware of this and it is being discussed in your PTO meetings or other kinds of things.
I'm not aware that it's been discussed in any PTO meetings, but I'm not aware. So
that's
it may
my
have
question.
been, I'm not sure. I did watch the Board of Ed meeting last week, and it seemed like there's still a lot of open questions about what the role would be of these people in particular, and there's a lot of concerns anyway, guns running through the elementary school.
So they plan to have
But
them armed?
Yes.
But what are they doing?
Oh, yes,
Their
I'm sorry.
job
Did I not say
descriptions?
that? Yes,
Yes.
they are armed.
So-
And they're looking for, and they're not, the people at the high school and middle school are police officers and report to the police chief. These people will be armed. They're looking for retired police officers, is my understanding.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that's a requirement, but they would report to the school security officer, not to the chief of police.
And the school resource officer at the high school and middle school level is more part of like that educational community, because they help kids, students can go to them with questions. It's not just, they're not just there to provide security. So it is a different model than the high school and middle school.
And I just think about if people have guns, I would prefer them reporting into the police department. That's our paramilitary group. So that's the group that should control them.
No, is there going to be a separation? There's a lot that they said they can't talk about because
Right.
of security enhancements, but is it my understanding there would be a split between the funds that they're asking for, their security enhancements is one bucket,
I
and
think so, I think.
the
they're talking-
hiring is
Yeah.
separate?
Yes,
My
there's
understanding as well.
two proposals.
You've got officers themselves, but then you also have maybe they want to put bulletproof glass in more places or something. I mean, things like that make it harder to actually physically get into the school, something like that.
So there is a capital request. So there are two things that are coming forward.
But I think too, I kind of thought about it myself, is that I think Chief Anderson's got to be in a little bit of a pickle, because in one respect, he has to tell the public that the schools are safe, that the current police can handle something that happens, but at the same time, there's this feeling that maybe it's not safe, or not safe enough, and this is why this is needed.
One of the other things that's on the list, that's in the material that the Board of Ed provided, or Dr. Adley provided is a list of all the towns, and which towns have what models or not models of support. So when you get a chance to look at that, you can see it's not that everybody has it except for us. I mean, it's nothing like that at all. But it is interesting to, it's a big deal. I mean, to me, it's a big deal. But, I would assume people have kids in the school. It's an even bigger deal than it is to me.
Well, it's interesting too, is we're all talking about it, but it's somewhat informal, even though it's a formal meeting. But I'm sure there might be people watching it, maybe members of the Board of Ed, that say, "You guys, you don't know what you're talking about." So it would be good to have, I think, a meeting and get things kind of hashed out. So maybe go ahead.
I was just going to say that I'm starting to jack. And F&B is part of that. It's sort of a triumvirate, and the three.
Maybe in the next few days, I'll
Maybe you
reach
could
out
talk
to
to
Jack
him
and some of the other people and try to come up with a date, and then let everybody know.
And the criteria, because I think he has some different ideas on how it could work or what the timing was. But I think the idea, because I mentioned that you had mentioned of doing something before the whole session was over, because some of the other discussions have been to just hit the road running November 28th when we reformulate, but that gives us a week, which this is really a big deal. to me, and
Mhm.
that a week doesn't make sense, and whether we can do enough up front, or whether we say, and the reason that they're asking for the approval then is they want to hire the people January 1st. Yeah, so all of your opinions, all of our opinions are.
I also think they want them to hit the ground running January 1st. They'll already be hired, if I'm not mistaken, start working.
So there must be vetting these people now.
I would
They have a
probably,
few, they have a
Hopefully.
few targeted already. Not all of them, but some of them. But, so
Okay.
that's the whole process, and each of us get to, think about get up to speed as much as possible, what do we think about it, and how we support or not, or question or whatever. So that's why we're trying to, we've had a lot of conversations
Yeah.
about this.
well, we might talk too, just to change subject here, talk about the parking at home school. That's another
There's
thing.
another project, I spend, I guess, too much time, I spend a lot of time doing this stuff. Anyway, another series of things that are coming up with we need it approved right away. As you know, HHR, which is Hindley Homes and Royal, they're doing, upgrades to the capital upgrades, and there's a big plan and a lot of work. And one of the recent proposals that is being discussed is the taking that proposal, if any of you were at Hindley, Homes, you know what I'm talking about more. But that house that was taken down, that house that was purchased by the town and then taken down, would be incorporated into some of the work that's going to be done there and be turned into a parking lot. And there are implications of that. I'm not in that area, so I'm not sure I really understand all the pieces of that. But there's a proposal that there may be a capital request that's going to come in relating to that, and that gets tied into some state work, but that also is on the same time frame that, I don't know how you want to
Well,
incorporate that into
there
what's
might be
going on.
some safety or health issues with that, but I'm sure the neighbors are tracking it. They may not be happy with the plan to put extra parking. As I recall, that drops off there. I thought it was it's not a flat piece of land, so I think they have.
When we purchased it, the purpose was to be able to add on to the school, and that was the reason we purchased the property. Luckily, we had them tear it down, otherwise we would have had a clubhouse.
Right.
And the issue was that they said that because the land is not flat, that they can't build on it. So I don't know how you put a parking lot in that spot. I guess you can, but
Make it a parking range.
there's a lot of
Phil.
dirt, fill would have to go,
Yeah.
whatever.
I
Yeah.
think that would be the question that one would ask when it's presented to us.
Yeah, so this is another thing that's coming. I don't know the timetable on that.
Well,
Is
the state needs it approved by November 30th.
Okay.
Or
all right.
December, I think November 30th, something like that. But
Yeah.
they're hoping to get an extension. I think they want to package it in with the other stuff that's going forward to the state, and that has where that time frame. This is not a separate item going around. This is moving something, incorporating it into the current proposals. And I think they're trying to find out from the state whether they can at least have through our December 5th meeting, so that there's some time for it to be discussed and things like that. But that's the date that determines when things are incorporated into the full proposal for the state. So that's a whole different,
So the purpose of this parking lot, to expand the parking lot, is because of the construction that's going to be going on? that needs
I don't
additional
know.
parking?
I have no
Homes
idea.
parking lot has always been overcrowded, like for homes.
You could use
Well,
it.
I'm
It's always been an
I'm
issue.
in homes, that's not children with homes, and
Jeremy.
would be okay when it
Yeah.
goes in, so I don't know why it's having issues. Curious, the population for the home school is probably about the same, the buildings are about the same size, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's the valid questions, and we would have to have a conversation about it, but that's what, and part of it, maybe they're looking at the whole, this is a massive upgrade to the schools. And so if you're going to do something and you feel it needs to be done, now's the time to do it. Whether or not you feel it needs to be done is a discussion.
Okay.
We just got over to the building down.
Yeah.
That was a big issue, if you recall.
Oh, it was.
It was.
My
Yeah.
understanding is that if it's a town property, the school, it wasn't the property of the schools.
Oh,
Is that true?
We'd have to look that.
That's a good question. Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, because like behind my house on Edgerton is the middle school property, but the town owns what was the former senior center. You know, where that,
That's right.
and it's the same kind of thing, and it's not, that, everybody thinks that's part of the school, it's not, it's town
Good
land,
point, good point, that property may not be.
you know. So any other announcements or whatnot? Can I get a motion to dismiss? All in favor? Okay, all right, well, thank you.